This is the Digital Marketing Experts Podcast episode. No, why am I trying to sound like a radio announcer? Experts in the Wire, episode 27. Sam Mallikarjunan. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 27 of Experts on the Wire. Today my guest is Sam Mallikarjunan, whose name I have practiced pronouncing at least a few times. When I read Sam's post entitled The Hard Choices Behind How Inbound.org Grew 5X, I knew I had to have Sam on the show. Inbound.org, for those of you that don't know, has grown to over 160,000 members in the last few years. And Sam is one of the people responsible for helping to lead that growth. So we dissect many of the elements of Inbound.org's growth, including why you need to ignore your earliest adopters, keeping a team focused on one thing, and that would be only the things you can grow with statistical significance, how Inbound leveraged SEO, their homepage algorithm. Yes, Sam tells us how their homepage algorithm operates, and the secrets behind the persona and microcopy on Inbound. Hint, it is modeled after a real person. Inbound.org, by the way, is a piece within HubSpot Labs, which of course is a part of the bigger company HubSpot. So Sam's going to talk about that a little bit at the beginning. So I hope you enjoyed today's discussion on episode 27 of Experts in the Wire with Sam Mallikarjunan. So Sam, before we get into Inbound.org specifically, can you tell me exactly what HubSpot Labs is and what do you do involved with HubSpot Labs?
Sure. So we jokingly refer to HubSpot Labs as the super secret internal R&D department at HubSpot. It's super secret mostly because nobody works on explaining to the world what it is HubSpot Labs does. But primarily what we do is work on building and growing new products or new pieces of technology that are not related to what the core product team is doing. So you're probably familiar with things like Marketing Grader, or you might have heard of freestockphotos.org, or you might have heard of probably what's the most popular, which is inbound.org. My job is to help guide the product teams on what we're building to make sure that we're building something that people are going to use, and then also to help grow the product and make sure that it's having a big impact in the world and it's actually benefiting the people that we're trying to help.
Awesome. And so where does HubSpot Labs fit in context with just HubSpot? Is it basically used for like experimental things that might turn into more of the core product at some point, or what exactly is like the purpose behind having something like HubSpot Labs to begin with?
Sure. So it gives us the freedom to work on products that don't have to meet the rigorous standards of our internal product team, right? So we have, thousands upon thousands of paying customers of the core HubSpot product, and it has to work, and it has to work right, and it has to be powerful, and it has to do everything they expect. By segmenting the team into HubSpot, the HubSpot Labs from the HubSpot product team or the HubSpot marketing team, we can still continue to invest in innovation, focus on disrupting ourselves, competing with ourselves, as well as building a moat around our own company to help future growth, but without distracting, say, the core marketing team from generating leads or the core product team from building a very awesome user experience. I
got it. So it gives you a lot of room to kind of make mistakes and maybe try things that are experimental, where I don't know how many users HubSpot has, where thousands of users are not depending upon the product just to work correctly. So that's great. So I wanted to talk to you, and Sam, I know we've interacted maybe a little bit online on Twitter and things over the years, but your article entitled The Hard Choices Behind How Inbound.org Grew 5 Times really caught my attention. And that's why I reached out to you for this interview specifically. So I want to talk about Inbound for a while and touch upon some of the points you made in this article. The first thing I wanted to ask is and I don't know if you know this, when Inbound first came out, I was one of the first moderators at that time. And I remember actually going into the WordPress version of Inbound and like editing like some posts or code or something along with Casey, who was working on it at that time. Mm-hmm. So my past of Inbound.org and knowledge of it is back when it was this idea that Rand had, and him and Dharmesh kind of worked on it together. And so catch me up to like, what is Inbound now as a part of HubSpot, and like what what is it thought of as like this separate entity? Like, how does it really fit into the context of Inbound, and where does Inbound see it headed?
Sure. So, by the way, fun fact: Casey is running the team again.
That's right.
We managed to get him back, and he's working at HubSpot now. Inbound.org is kept entirely separate from HubSpot. We at HubSpot differentiate a little bit, or pretty clearly actually, between the inbound movement and the growth of HubSpot as a company. So the inbound event every year in Boston, HubSpot's the largest sponsor. We have several keynotes, but we don't look at it as like a HubSpot user conference. It's the inbound event that brings together inbound marketers from all over the world. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on whether or not you ask the people who have to work 20-hour days to make that thing happen, it only lasts about 4 days a year. And so inbound.org is supposed to be the home of the inbound movement for the rest of the year. It's supposed to be where people can connect, where they can ask questions, where they can learn from each other without having it be within the context of working with a software company, without having to read the HubSpot blog, without having to download a HubSpot ebook, without having to do any of that. We want to have a place where the inbound movement can connect and help itself grow instead of sort of being dragged along or pushed along by software companies like Moz or by HubSpot.
Got it. And so how does that, and obviously only as transparently as you can be, but how does that sort of fit in, without a better way to say it, really financially speaking, within HubSpot? I know that it was like Dharmesh invested, or HubSpot invested in Inbound. Like, how does that all kind of work and fit together?
Yeah, so originally it was essentially a personal side project between Dharmesh, who's the co-founder of HubSpot, and Rand Fishkin from Moz. But it got too big for them. About when I joined in 2014-ish or 2013-ish, it had already reached about the 15,000 to 20,000 user mark. And they both agreed that the inbound movement growing is good for both companies, and somebody needed to focus on growing it a lot. Inbound.org generates negligible revenue. We charge for some business listings, but that's mostly because we were too lazy to build an anti-spam system. So money is a great anti-spam system.
Yep.
But it generates negligible amounts of revenue. And really the value both for HubSpot and for Moz and for any other company building an inbound solution is that the greatest barrier to us selling more software subscriptions is more people doing good inbound marketing. It's not HubSpot running up against Moz for SEO tools. It's not, running up against, Monetate or whatever for personalization tools. It's the fact that very few people in the world, very few marketers in the world still do any inbound marketing. And if they do inbound marketing, they don't do it very well. The purpose of inbound.org is to help more people do it and help them do it better. If more people do good inbound marketing, more people will buy subscription to all of our software, and more people will stay customers that see value in the actual software.
Totally makes sense. It's kind of the all ships rise with the tide sort of concept, I think, where not only will people, hopefully in your case, use HubSpot, but more people will probably be likely to use Moz, or also buy services like we offer here, which is SEO services. So totally makes sense. Yep. In terms of, so you said you joined the inbound.org team in 2014, was it?
I want to say, yeah, it would have been June of 2014 is when I joined the inbound.org team.
Awesome. And so your article, How Inbound Grew 5 Times, we're going to link to it in the show notes. It's on readthink.com. Take us back to that point in 2014. What were some of the early conversations and meetings like around inbound.org? You were at X amount of users. What were some of those meetings like, starting to try to plan that process of growing inbound.org?
The first thing we really had to do is decide what we wanted the site to be. So like you said, in the early days when you were starting, it was extremely SEO heavy. Moz had a heavy influence, and a lot of the topicality was about SEO specifically, which is valuable, and it's an important part of inbound marketing, but it's not all there is to what we consider sort of the broader discipline of inbound marketing. However, SEOs were the most active, most vocal, most influential users. A lot of them were moderators like yourself. The first thing that we had to do is make a decision to intentionally divest ourselves from that sort of granular focus and focus on a broader array of topics that would be more broadly applicable. Because there are millions of marketers in the world, there's less number of people who are dedicated to the SEO profession. And then the next thing for us was to figure out what our goals were to grow. So my big thing when I'm running a growth campaign is to, and somewhere I have the growth hacker's prayer, but it's essentially, focus on things that you have the ability to grow with statistical significance and ignore things that you can't. Right. So, user retention is the really hot, sexy topic in product growth right now, and it's incredibly valuable, and you can't grow if you have bad churn, if you're losing all of the new members that sign up in a given cohort. But you also can't make any intelligent decisions about them until you have a large enough sample size.
Right.
So we actually focused initially just on traffic. How do we get more people to come to the site? And then worked our way down the funnel. How do we get more registered users on the site? And then we focused on what are the fun, sexy topics that everybody else wanted to focus on. We didn't actually get to those until probably Q4 of 2015, which is like user activation, user retention, user reactivation, the really fun stuff that everybody wants to focus on. So that was the hard conversation, and actually why this article was like sitting in my heart for so long, 6 months after I left the inbound.org team, was how difficult it was to keep people focused on growth goals that weren't the smart, hot, sexy topics of the day, and that were grow traffic, grow new registered users, and get people accomplishing simple activities.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk about that focus element a little bit. At the beginning, how difficult was it to get people all on the same page and kind of get them focused? And I guess I should ask, what size of a team are we talking about here? 5 people, 20 people? What was the scope of it? And then how did you initially establish that focus?
Sure. So when we first started, it was, I guess, Dharmesh, Andre, the tech lead, Mike, developer, Ed Fry, who you probably know, Mary Green, and myself. So that's 6 people. Over the course of the next year, we grew to about 17 people, mostly an even split between the product and the growth team, with a little bit of a heavy bias towards the growth team. The reason we biased in size towards the growth team was that inbound.org wasn't missing core features, right? Like there wasn't stuff that, LinkedIn did or something like that was so core to LinkedIn's early growth that we needed to copy it right away that inbound.org didn't already have. It needed a better experience, a cleaner experience, and some new features, but the real focus was investing in growing the thing that we already have. Again, similar to how we look at a company like HubSpot, it's not a lack of features that's holding or that impedes the growth of any company, including HubSpot. It's the lack of growing in the market and a focus on growth. So we had about 5 people to start, and we grew to about 17 people by the end of 2015.
And was there like one person that kind of took the lead and took charge at focusing, or was it more of a group kind of collaborative effort at leading?
Yeah. So Dharmesh does a very good job of trying to keep us focused. The focus. I say in the article, I can still imagine him every time I feel myself getting distracted, a tiny Dharmesh Shah standing on my shoulder telling me to focus. Yeah. And it's because the team was assembled of the world's mightiest heroes, right? We tried to make the Avengers of growth teams. We had, one of the great, a great SEO guy in Richard. We had an awesome UX guy in Ciprian. We had a great data analyst. We had tech stack. We had growth people. We tried to get the best that we could, which is awesome. But there's a significant downside, which is that experts tend to think that they're always right. And when you have 17 people on a team who all think that they know the right thing to do, it can impede execution.
Yep.
So there were a lot of times that we just made the final word, and I sometimes had to say, this is how we're going to do things. This is what we're going to focus on. It may be wrong, it may be right, but it's a decision that has to be made. So we encouraged a lot of collaboration and a lot of discussion, and we were very, very open in our Slack channel and on our wiki and letting people share their perspectives. But at the end of the day, decisions had to be made, and I made that decision, usually with Dharmesh telling me to make a simpler decision, but I made a decision anyways.
Awesome. Yeah, I was really curious about that, because it maybe for you or other people kind of in that leadership position, it could be easy to maybe feel like the bad guy or somebody that's just kind of having to draw that line in the sand and just kind of take people in a certain direction. Did you ever feel like that when you're in that role and responsibility that people, you might feel like the bad guy to some degree, having to just kind of call the last shot?
I didn't feel like the bad guy because everybody was smart enough to understand that we specify omissions. So we used a framework called MSPOT, where mission strategy playbook of missions and targets. Omissions is something that we were very specific about specifying. So people knew that we knew something was wrong and that we were ignoring it. The times when I did feel bad is that, really smart people want to work on really, really smart things. And the top of the funnel isn't the world's most challenging place to play all the time, right? So just, working on co-marketing initiatives or business initiatives and really chasing like a traffic and new members goal isn't something that really smart people wanted to focus on. And I was and am still extremely concerned with the long-term success of anybody who works with me. And so it was very, very important to me to find opportunities to help people grow in their careers while maintaining this focus. So I never felt like the bad guy, but still at the same time, one of my biggest challenges was, how do I help somebody who's very passionate about a specific topic continue to grow her career in that direction while making sure that the team stayed focused on the objectives that we needed to grow.
Got it. Interesting. So I do want to talk about some of the growth tactics now. The first one you kind of touched upon was that the core base of users were people interested in SEO, but you knew you needed to grow outside of that. One quote that I love from the article was, your early adopters will rarely form the core of your future growth. And can you speak to that a little bit more specifically in terms of like how did you move away from the SEO audience into a bigger inbound marketing audience?
Yeah, sure. So I love Alex Schultz's perspective on product market fit being when you have user cohort retention that's asymptotic to the x-axis, right? So that's his excessively fancy way of saying that when people sign up for your website, all of them don't eventually quit. You keep those users. The problem is if you look at sort of a bell curve of adoption, the first people who adopt something are people who will try everything, right? These are the people who try, I don't know, like nougat flavored jelly beans or something. I don't know, like they're going to try any weird thing. They just like trying new stuff.
Yeah.
And if you chase them as active users, if you really focus on them, you're going to end up with like a giant line of like variations on nougat flavored jelly beans. I don't know if that's the thing, and I hope I'm not offending anybody. It's just the weirdest thing that comes to mind. If it is,
I don't know if I would ever try that, if that's actually real.
Yeah. So you're going to end up with a broad line of that, when in reality, like the majority of the people like other jelly bean flavors. And so what we really wanted to do was make sure that we weren't just building the world's greatest site for SEOs. We were building, or even early adopters, because there are people who weren't SEOs but who were early adopters of these sites, but that we were able to build something for the persona that we call Marketing Mary. Which is the majority of the marketing and marketing leadership profession, which are people who have been doing marketing, in some cases, a lot longer than digital marketing has been an important part of the mix. They need to learn about digital marketing. They need to be inspired for the potential of digital marketing, and they need help actually doing it and actually executing on it. And that's not you, Dan, right? Like you don't need our help in order to do great marketing. You do great marketing on your own. And so we pulled a play that was relatively controversial because there are, like I said, there's purists, including Dharmesh, on the team who, a lot of people who think that, if the product doesn't do what you expect the product to do, that's your fault, not the user's fault, which is true 99% of the time. The one notable exception being communities. Communities are marketplaces, right? Because communities are marketplaces, the goal is to connect peer-to-peer. And if you don't seed the right sorts of peers, you're going to end up with the wrong sorts of behavior. And there's no really a way to influence that with product design. You have to influence that with the inputs, with the sorts of people that you're bringing in. So we pulled a play that we call, or that other people have called, the Wizard of Oz, which is we artificially influenced the content that made the homepage to broaden the topicality away from just being about SEO. And we seeded discussions and seeded content that were about a lot of other things besides SEO. And we retooled the beginning of signing up for inbound.org to be way less about SEO and be way more about joining a community of marketers. That was the key thing. And then we focused on scaling that. That was the key thing to helping us divest from selling nougat flavored jelly beans to selling like a broader sort of packet of Jelly Bellies.
Got it. And so you must have read my mind. I wanted to go to that manually adjusting rankings on the homepage thing next. How did that work exactly? Like, there's like an organic ranking based upon votes and kind of how that's calculated. And it's funny because now I'm remembering being on some of the early emails where people were talking about how to actually do that on Inbound back when it first launched. But so you've got probably like an organic ranking based upon an algorithm, but then people with like admin access can go in and manually edit what's showing up where. Is that kind of how that worked?
Not quite that granular level of control. So the organic rankings are determined by activity and velocity of activity, right? So if you get a lot of upvotes in a short period of time or a lot of comments in a short period of time, you'll go to the top of the index even if you don't have a lot, right? So we don't care if you have 1,000 upvotes over the course of a year. We care a lot more if you have like 100 upvotes over the course of a day, because that velocity is what to us it indicates value and what we want to have be fresh on the index. And then there's a pretty aggressive decay. So stuff will decay off the homepage pretty quickly unless it continues to grow in activity, because stuff can be interesting to you and your 10 friends, but then not interesting to any of the other 100,000 people on inbound.org. So the velocity matters a lot, and then it decays. As far as the admin controls, admins could boost posts. So they could essentially add a certain amount of upvotes that are still subject to the same decay requirements, so they can simulate like several people voting for a post all at once, but then if it doesn't get picked up by the community, it'll still decay. And then we also added the ability to feature content, which was administrator only, which is if we had something that we really wanted to make sure that the members of the community saw, we could feature it and pin it to the top of the page. Got
it. Okay, yeah, I was definitely curious about that part of it. So regarding developing personas, business people might assume that the exercise's value in that is identifying the who, but in this post, you talked about pointing out the why as much as being, or even more important than pointing out the who of the persona. So I was wondering if you could talk to that point a little bit and expand on that.
Yeah, the who is only relevant because it's an easier function of why. Right? Why is actually a different question to answer because humans are complex creatures. Who is easy to answer because we can be bucketed into demographic profiles, male between the age of 30 and 45 with an income of yada yada, located yada yada. That's super easy to do, and so that's how marketing has mostly run throughout the last several decades, because it's the closest that we can get, and it's usually sort of pretty right. People that tend to have similar backgrounds and demographics tend to have similar outlooks and actions in the future. However, usually pretty all right is not nearly good enough in an extremely competitive space like inbound marketing. So we focus on trying to solve for the why. We have it bucketed into two different sorts of data: implicit data and explicit data. Explicit data is things that you tell us about yourself, such as I'm looking for a job. Right? It's as you're signing up for inbound.org, you'll see an option to say, that I'm looking for a job or I'm looking to grow my career. And then implicit data is the actions that you take on the site. So it might be the sorts of articles that you read. It might be the tags of the articles that you read. It might be, we wanted to see what the mix of level of sophistication on the site was. So we put buttons at the top for beginning, intermediate, and advanced. It might be the interaction that you had with those level of buttons. That helps us not only do good user analysis and say things like, people who describe themselves as, an intermediate level of sophistication tend to be the greatest avenue of growth for weekly active users. It not only helps us from a product-based decision, but it also helps us customize the experience to you. Both in the email notifications, the social notifications, the paid targeting that we did, and the myinbound.org feature that they rolled out not too long ago.
And what is the paid targeting you're referring to?
Yeah, so we did a lot with paid actually in 2015. Both retargeting, using tools like Perfect Audience and Facebook and Twitter. We tried to have people who were either a good fit for new acquisition or keep people active who were inactive. So if we wanted to target people who we knew were users of the site, but who had become inactive, we could do that through Twitter paid or through Facebook paid and through other channels. That's actually one of my favorite growth tactics. The ability to combine a list of email addresses with paid targeting, or a list of email addresses and then get a bunch of Twitter handles and then target that with paid targeting. is a great. It's actually something we do on readthink.com as well. Like I can know everybody who is in HubSpot's lead database who has an account on medium.com by checking to see their Twitter account and then checking to see if there's a relevant user handle on Medium, and then running paid ads to try and get them to be active with the content. It's a good tactic.
Oh, wow. So does Inbound, I think I originally signed up with Twitter. Do you automatically kind of have everyone's Twitter and email address on Inbound?
So that was actually I don't even know if they resolved this debate, but that was a very passionate debate on our team, which is, should we allow people to sign up without Twitter? Part of that was a technology decision. So it's just Twitter makes it easy because username management and profile control and all that other stuff is all handled when they create their account, and we don't have to create like password reset and deduplication and all those sort of user management features. We didn't have to create that on our own. And some of the people on the team argued that like modern marketers don't not have Twitter, right? Everybody should have a Twitter account if you're an inbound marketer who's going to be a good fit for the community. I actually argued relatively passionate to the other side, and we won sort of a halfway thing where you can sign up for notifications and the digest. And I think maybe full profiles now, but before it was just you could sign up for the digest and the email and stuff like that with a username and password or an email address and password. But to engage in the community, you had to use Twitter. Like I said, part of that was technology. Also, part of that was an anti-spam filter. In general, if you're launching a new piece of technology, if you can get someone else to do your work for you, that's great. And even though Twitter doesn't have the world's greatest anti-spam, they have some anti-spam. So by making people sign up with a Twitter account or something like that, it prevents us from having to do as much spam control.
Got it. So when you're talking about maybe targeting people on Facebook that have become inactive users, are you doing that with their email address?
Usually, yeah. So we would we used HubSpot obviously to manage all of the contact lifecycle stages and information and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And if somebody hasn't been seen on the site or hasn't clicked an element or done some active user definition activity recently, we can feed them into a smart list, and then we can use that smart list to target ads on Facebook that bring them back into the fold and make sure that we're spending money growing weekly active users. Got
it. That's really smart. That makes a lot of sense. I want to read another quote from, I just love this article. You could probably tell when I saw the art, I've been doing this. I'll see an article I really love and then just kind of contact that person right away for the interview. I did that with Laura Weaver, who wrote an article about story hacking on copy hackers. But another quote from your article, it says, "It's tempting to show smart, colorful graphs with really mathy sounding conclusions and data sets. But if you're doing first touch lead generation attribution analysis on your blog that is generating 5 leads a month, you're wasting your time." And you touched upon that, and there's a lot of words in there. You touched upon that a little bit earlier, where you're talking about just measuring traffic up front and not worrying about all the more sophisticated stuff. So I was wondering if you could talk to that a little bit more in context of that quote, and also like the elimination of like why you don't need all these graphs and stuff up front. And then maybe secondarily, how you kind of move into that as the site grows and you have more data and you have more stuff to look at and analyze.
Yeah, so that's not the cleanest quote I've ever written or the cleanest sentence I've ever written, but that's actually telling a story. I was consulting with a startup, and I was sitting in the meeting with their executive team, and we were looking over all these charts on customer churn. And I eventually asked to just see the raw data because I like playing with the raw data. And they were analyzing 4 customers that churned over the course of a quarter. And that's completely useless because those 4 customers could have gone out of business. It could have been an account manager having a bad day, right? Like there's highly volatile things that can swing small numbers in big directions, right? So if you go from 4 customers churning to 2 customers churning, that doesn't mean that your churn improved by 50%, even though technically it did. That doesn't mean that like the experience or the data that's being indicated from the customer has actually improved by 50%. You didn't necessarily do anything. It just may not have been tax season that month. So I strongly encourage all startups that I work with, including the sort of teams that I manage, to focus on growing the things that you can measure with statistical significance and ignore the things you can't. So when HubSpot expanded into Latin America, that was one of the teams that I managed as well. The there was a small sales team of a few people, and they wanted to generate leads off the blog, and they already were. But before you focus on generating leads off the blog, let's focus on, can we scalably acquire new blog subscribers and grow blog traffic? So the LATAM blog, I gave them a goal of, let's get to 100,000 blog subscribers really before we start doing advanced lead attribution, especially because with 2 or 3 sales reps on the team, they might only be doing 10 deals a month between the 2 of them, which isn't useful for us to look at lead to close rates. If we can't make an intelligent decision based on the data, I don't want it in our minds at all. I want to ignore it entirely while we build up a bank of data that can actually be that can be intelligently and usefully interpreted, so that you don't end up chasing data that seems interesting and it seems smart because it uses all the right words, but it's not conducted in a way that actually gives it meaning and guidance.
Got it. I'm glad you mentioned a little bit about traffic acquisition and getting new traffic and new users, because I want to shift back to inbound for a second. I remember replying to a thread on inbound, maybe about 12 to 16, 18 months ago, where I think Ed started it, and it was about some problems that inbound was having around SEO. And I'm not sure how involved you were with that, but I'm curious how much SEO inbound actually uses, if that kind of challenge was resolved, or anything involving SEO and inbound.org you could speak to.
Yeah, so the SEO architecture was horrendous for a long time, which you probably know as well as anybody. And it's, to an extent, it's the cobbler's kids go unshod sort of situation, right? Where we were so focused on adding value to others, we didn't necessarily focus enough on growing ourselves, which is why we created the growth team at inbound.org as part of HubSpot Labs, was so that we could not just focus on the community management piece and making sure people got smart answers to their smart questions, but that we could focus on growing it itself. There were a bunch of detail things that were wrong. So when content is dynamically generated, a lot of it is extraordinarily light. A lot of it is buried deep in the architecture, and then a lot of it gets randomly deleted. Either by the people who submitted it, or by moderators, or because it was spam. That really messes up just the technical SEO architecture of the site. And I'd have to look up the chart. It was like 10x or something like that. We were getting like 2,000 visits a month or something extremely small from organic traffic. Oh, wow. And we wanted to be up, closer to like the 50,000 or 60,000 organic visits a month range, which is where we felt we should be. The people I was looking at are people like Stack Overflow and Quora, who do a really good job of having dynamically generated content that still shows up when people ask answers. Because you would think that it's a great opportunity for SEO, right? You have an infinite number of long tail combinations of URLs being created, but if you don't solve that one technical piece, even though like technical SEO may not be the sexiest topic nowadays with marketing automation and personalization and regressive analytics and all this other crap. If you don't solve that one technical analytics piece, the rest of it doesn't matter, because these search engines can't actually read your site and they're going to give up. So we called at HubSpot's product team, they call it a code red. We called it essentially the same thing, which is where we said we're going to stop building any new features, and we're just going to focus on product stability and SEO to help it make sure that, if you think of the search engine as one of the users, it needs to be able to have a stable experience where it can find and index the relevant content. And a lot of that, by the way, was we just de-indexed like 80% of the website because the vast majority of it was not useful. And, a lot of it was duplicate content, and, we struggled really, really hard. That was one of the tougher decisions, which was how much of the content should we just remove from the index entirely. But that led to a big lift in organic traffic for all the content we didn't remove from the index.
Got it. One thing I tweeted, I think this must have been 6 to 8 months ago. I really liked your title tag on inbound.org that was there at one point. It's similar now. Right now, when I Google inbound.org, it says the smartest inbound marketing community online, which is interesting because I think the actual title tag right now is top marketing content today. So Google's either swapping it out, or it was just updated, or something happened. But at one point, it was even where the smartest inbound marketers hang out online, or something to that effect. I really liked that one, by the way. A little bit better than the one right now. But I'm curious where, and this is getting super specific, but my mind always goes here. So was there an actual person that is writing these title tags and coming up with these, or is this trickling down from the top of kind of coming up with like the brand voice of inbound.org?
So I decided, shortly after the beginning of 2015, that I wanted the site to have some personality. I was a big admirer of MailChimp's microcopy, and some of those other sites that do a really good job of what we call microcopy. It's these very small interactions where MailChimp will literally say like, "Hey, you have a nice T-shirt on today."
Yeah.
And we all know it's crap. They can't see our T-shirts, at least we hope not. But it creates a little bit of a neurological response that makes you a little bit happier. It makes the site more enjoyable to use. Mm-hmm. And I tried writing a job description to hire a copywriter, and I couldn't. So I wrote a love letter instead. And I'll try and dig it up and send it to you so you can link it in the show notes. But one guy responded to my love letter about having somebody who can write copy that people really loved, that made them happy, and that was funny. His name was Brian Lenny. I believe he's now at Hotjar, actually. Mm-hmm. And he did a really good job of adding personality to the site. This is one of the reasons, by the way, I'm very, very convinced that, marketing and product people may not be the same, but you can't really have a successful startup without both a growth and a product person. Because the engineers did a great job on the site, but they built the site for engineers, right? Like the people tend to build for themselves. And the copy wasn't that compelling, although it was like architecturally correct in every aspect you could possibly imagine. It wasn't necessarily like the fun, happy voice that we wanted it to have. And we actually modeled the personality of the website specifically after Dharmesh.
Interesting.
So Beth Dunn, who does all the microcopy for HubSpot, was kind enough to sort of sit us down and teach us how she developed the voice for the microcopy for the HubSpot software and website. And we sort of thought it through, and if you've ever met him or if you ever have the privilege of meeting him, like he's a really, really, really nice guy. He's always incredibly helpful. He's very unintimidating to people who, if you can get past the fact that he's like the founder of a multi-billion-dollar company, he's a very unintimidating person that you always feel like you can ask for help from, and that he'll give you good help and good solutions. And that's really the spirit that we wanted to come through on the website. So Brian really focused actually on like, how would Dharmesh, or what would Dharmesh say here if Dharmesh was a little bit more excitable and extroverted than he is naturally?
Yeah.
Like how would he actually greet somebody on this website? And that was the direction that we took the site's copy, and it had a big impact. Subjectively, a lot of people gave us good feedback, and even objectively, the click-through rates on the core elements that we were tracking increased when we added good, friendly copy to it.
That's super interesting, because it sounds like this is like you as well. I always notice the small things and really believe they have an impact bigger than people realize. Like, for example, at the bottom of inbound.org right now, it says in little gray letters, Wednesday, ! You've almost made it to the end of the week, ! And like, that's a great little touch there at the bottom. It makes me think of 37 Signals or Basecamp. I think they might say something like Happy Wednesday or something at the top of their blog, which is another example of microcopy. But I did, if you can believe it or not, I had the privilege to eat a one-on-one lunch with Dharmesh in like 2012, because at that time he was trying to hire a bunch of SEO people, and I was considering that opportunity at that time. And like you said, just a great, nice guy, very helpful, really easy to get along with. So I can totally see now where the copy comes from his voice. That's super interesting. So
yeah, and I will say that so Casey Henry has taken over the inbound.org team, mm-hmm. And I don't know which challenge is harder. Like, I'm tempted to say his challenge is harder, which is now solving for weekly active users now that they have 160,000 members. But he's really good at sort of keeping the team focused on those little hooks, those little things that bring people back in. Nir Ayal's obviously work on creating the triggers and hooks and stuff that bring people back in. I think the big challenge that I had when I was leading the team was being focused and ignoring spending time on some of the very, very granular changes. Like, we didn't have that copy when I was leading the team at the bottom. Mm-hmm. But now that we're growing, and now that like user retention is very important, there's all these details, it really opens up a ton of possibilities to sort of have these very minor changes, these very little things that make a difference in people's lives. It does. It makes you happy, and a little bit of happy juice in your brain, right, can disproportionately impact the rest of the day, and definitely disproportionately impact your usage of software. So they're really investing, I think, in making the experience awesome for people who are further along the bell curve and who need a lot more of a reason to continue using something other than it just being nougat flavored.
Awesome. Yeah, nougat flavored. I like it. I'm going to also link in the show notes. There was a great article that I just saw the other day from the team that helped build and design Slack, which talks about a lot of these micro things too. If people are interested about that, I'll link it in the show notes. Just to tie up the inbound topic, then I had a few other kind of random questions I wanted to ask at the end here. Just to tie that up. So you went through a period of where you're just measuring like these metrics like traffic, like you didn't have enough things that made it statistically, viable to measure these more granular things. But at what point did you kind of move into maybe measuring those more specific, more bottom of funnel like types of metrics, or did you?
Yeah, so I actually messed up there. I over-ignored some of them. So again, you should start focusing on them when you have a good statistical sample size. And I think we were at about the 3,000 weekly active user range, which is a good number of weekly active users that we can start focusing on user retention and viral coefficient growth and some of that sort of stuff. But we missed it because of, and I refer to it in the article, this thing called round number bias, which is a very powerful and almost irresistible force in chasing goals, which is the fact that you'll work harder to get from like 95,000 to 100,000, way harder to get from 95,000 to 100,000 something than you will to get from like 60,000 to 65,000 or 68,000. The temptation to chase a round number is incredibly powerful. You'll see companies all the time, right? Like they talk about wanting to be the next billion-dollar company. Not like I want to be a company with great user economics or customer economics. It's I want to be a billion-dollar company, right? Because it's easy for us to understand, and it really biases the behaviors that you take. And so we were chasing the 100,000 user mark. I think longer than we needed to. We should have stopped earlier and focused on weekly active users, because we actually bled out a ton of users that we could have retained and that now they're focusing on getting back. While we chased after being able to have like a 6-digit number on stage when we talked about inbound at the inbound conference. So that was probably one of my bigger mistakes. I've made many, but that's probably one of the larger ones. Was even if you have studied round number bias, it's still probably one of the easiest things in the world of business to fall victim to.
Totally see that. So are there any insights from what you learned on inbound that people could maybe apply to other types of sites like e-commerce or B2B or blogs? Any kind of insights we can draw to other situations?
Yeah, so one is that depth is not always the answer. Sometimes width is, right? So instead of making the site really, really valuable for SEOs, we tried to make it broadly valuable for a larger cross-section of customers. And for e-commerce specifically, I see this all the time. They try and have a very broad category of, or very broad depth of product category. So if I'm selling monitors, I want every possible iteration of that monitor. Whereas in reality, if you're using customer-centric unit economics, if you're like trying to grow customer LTV, selling somebody a monitor and then being able to sell them a keyboard and then being able to sell them a desk fan and then being able to sell them a desk, having that width of opportunity to own an entire persona rather than owning a vertical catalog of solutions actually is a more valuable business practice. And as I said, that was one of the keys to being successful at inbound.org, was not being just the place where you come to get an answer around SEO, but a place where you come to get where a specific type of user comes to get all of the answers they could possibly want around marketing.
So I could see that in a community. I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit here. Does that also run the risk of like you're spreading yourself too thin, or that perception like I'm offering a service? So if I were to start offering that kind of persona-centric thing, like, and trying to give people social media consulting, SEO, content, PR, that now the perception might be that I'm maybe not good at any one of those because I'm offering too many. Is that a risk as well?
I would say that's sort of the differentiation between like, and it's somewhat of a semantic distinction between solutions and width, right? So you want to focus. I don't think that you should like go offering social media and everything else like that, because if you don't have the ability to serve a good experience, you're not going to be able to retain those customers, and you're not going to do a good job of acquiring new customers. You're not going to be able to upsell, cross-sell, resell. But if you're able to do a good job, so like cheaphumidors.com was my job before HubSpot. We sold humidors cheaply. Back then, that was back when the exact match domain benefit was a lot higher.
Yeah.
But we also tried to sell lighters, and we tried to sell, the actual cigars, and we tried to sell stuff that fit within our orbit. So it didn't require like us to bring in additional specialization, but it was still things that was relevant to the persona. So it wasn't just having every possible iteration of humidor; it was having other stuff that people could buy that made my marketing automation investment valuable. And I will say, the more things you can solve, the better it is economically, the harder it is to focus, right? Because the beautiful thing about SaaS economics is the ability to lose money on acquiring a customer, to spend more than they pay you in, say, their first month, with the confidence that historically that sort of customer will continue paying you for like 30 additional months, so you can break even after 5 months and have 25 months of profitability. Right. In general, e-commerce companies don't have that level of confidence that a user will buy again or a customer will buy again, which is what makes it very hard as opposed to a subscription. With services is a tough thing because it's not just a tiny shift. You're not just adding something to your product catalog, retooling your category architecture, and changing your top of the funnel campaigns. Yeah. You have to fundamentally add new competencies. Yeah. That would sort of be like, if I started if at cheaphumidors.com, I had also started selling like desk chairs. But I was buying crappy desk chairs, and the desk chairs fell apart and broke. Like, that's obviously a bad experience. But still being able to, but expanding as far as I can wide within the purview of where I'm still able to solve for the customer and add a good experience really aids in the customer acquisition and nurturing economics.
Got it. So just to shift to a few other quick topics here at the end, is readthink.com, is that a Medium site? Are you on Medium?
It is a Medium site. Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on, sometimes like entrepreneurs or CEOs or people within companies might have a hard time, they might resist publishing on other sites. Do you have any tips of advice or words of wisdom around that, around the issues of whether or not to publish only on your own site, or whether it's okay to go out on other sites like Medium or LinkedIn Pulse once in a while?
Yeah. So Medium has actually sort of solved this for you in that they've become a conventional CMS. They'll let you have your own domain. So readthink.com, we could just as easily have set up as medium.hubspot.com and had it be on our domain. That's not quite the problem when it comes to Medium. I wrote, by the way, a giant article on Medium about why Medium works, which explains sort of their platform strategy and the ability to have it come with a built-in audience. That's really the advantage of Medium, is it comes with a massive built-in audience, and if you nail the formula right, you'll get exposure to their audience. In terms of the more specific question of writing for yourself versus sort of writing elsewhere, I think people are overly biased towards writing elsewhere because the benefits are more immediate. You get inbound links, you get higher search rankings, and because blogging is like on your own site is really, really hard. My team is long since tired of hearing me say the phrase blogging is like jogging. But it's because it takes a long time to see results. It's generally miserable. Most people don't enjoy it, but to see sort of long-term scalable health results, it's really the best way to go. And you might blog on your site for 3 to 6 months before you start getting more than like 50 to 100 views per article. But then there's this sort of compounding benefit over time. This hockey stick graph that really helps you. So I would almost always bias new companies unless you really, really need rapid revenue and like you just need exposure and it's part of a PR campaign. Then you can blog elsewhere on the internet to generate new attention. But focus on building your own sort of sustainable engine as much as you can, and then solve for capitalizing on other people's engines. That's going to drive value long term.
Definitely. It kind of reminds me of like how Gary Vaynerchuk might answer that. He might, it's not an either or. He would tell people to do both and just work harder and stay up later at night and make the time to do both.
I don't think people are going to, I'm not quite going to do the Gary V, like go crush it or whatever, stuff that he says. Yeah. Because I do understand that there are limitations to resources. Bias the resources in favor of building your own engine first, and then say, where can I build additional channels to sort of pour fuel into the engine. Because when you're blogging off site, that's really what you're doing. You're pouring fuel into the acquisition and retention engine that is your business model. When you're blogging on your own site, you're sort of building the mechanics of your acquisition and retention funnel. The other metaphor they're tired of hearing me say is there's no point pouring fuel into a leaking engine, right? So if driving traffic to us, if you're generating leads that sales doesn't call, or if you're closing customers that don't stay around, you suck. If you're generating leads that sales can't close, you still suck. If you're driving traffic that you can't turn into leads, you still suck, right? So like solve that problem before you go and solve the other problems of the world.
Love it. Much more practical advice than just Gary telling people to stay up later. I like it. So there's a post that you wrote in 2011. It's called My Favorite Sales Email Ever, where you talked about using humor to gain attention. Is that something you would still kind of stand by, and maybe the idea of just using humor in general to help, acquisition and even maintaining customers?
Man, first of all, that means that you're on my personal website, which is embarrassing because that thing is terrible. It still has me listed as an internet radio host, which was from way back in the day.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I was an AM/FM radio host. I had a talk radio show about scotch and cigars before I got into marketing.
Oh, no kidding. That's funny.
Story for another time. That site is being redesigned, I promise, if anybody goes to that. I will say that, again, with the who, what matters is not does humor work. What matters is does humor work for the persona I'm going after. So when I was doing experimental marketing in the earlier days at HubSpot, one of the personas that I was playing with were nonprofit marketers. People who do marketing for nonprofit companies. Mm-hmm. And I sent out this meme that was Michaela is not impressed, which was from the Olympics back then, right? It's a picture of Michaela winning silver or whatever it was happened. It was one of the U.S. gymnasts, and she just had this really unimpressed look on her face, and it became a meme on the internet. And that was the first sound beating that I got in understanding that I am not the user, I am not the persona. The persona that I'm going after is the persona, and I have to solve for them. Yeah. So I thought that was hysterical. So I said, I had so you think, H1 tags or you think H1 tags and meta tags or whatever are the only SEO you need to do on your site. Michaela is not impressed. I thought that was hysterical. And I just got flamed by the people on nonprofit. They're like, we're trying to save the world. We're doing important work, yada, yada, yada. So they didn't appreciate the humor. And then there was a huge percentage of them that didn't actually understand it. They thought there was a person at HubSpot named Michaela who had looked at their website and was upset with how they were doing SEO. So I definitely believe humor can be very, very powerful. Like I said, if you look at the microcopy between differences between the HubSpot software and inbound.org, you're going to notice subtle differences, even though they both use humor, because they're both going after slightly different audiences. In total. So if it fits your audience, if it fits the psychographic profile that you're creating with your buyer persona, absolutely use humor. But if it doesn't, don't.
Got it. And this just popped into my head because you said a lot of terminology in the marketing and kind of product world. What did you go to school for?
I am a college dropout. I'm a proud college dropout.
What did you start school for?
I started school studying political science at the University of South Florida. Yeah, so completely unrelated. I got into marketing because I was selling health insurance out of the VIP lounge at a cigar bar. Yes, the irony is not lost on me. And I started helping some of those folks just with how the internet works and how to build websites and stuff because I knew it. And then I just sort of slid into marketing tangentially from being in the cigar world. So. Oh
wow, no kidding. It's funny all the different paths people come into marketing from, because I guess everything needs marketing in one way or another. So telling me that your blog is old and that you're redoing it is a good segue for me to ask, where would you like people to go to visit you online, to follow you, maybe besides your personal site at the moment until it gets its facelift?
Yeah, so the designers I'm working with assure me that end of July my new site will be done. But because it literally hasn't been updated in probably 8 years. You can find me on Twitter or LinkedIn. If you Google Sam Mallikarjunan or anything even close to that, Mallikarjunan, you'll find me because I'm relatively good at ranking on Google search engine results.
Yep.
Or you can go to inboundcommerce.com, which is the home of the book that I co-authored with Michael Ewing about specifically e-commerce and how to do inbound marketing with e-commerce.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I was going to ask about that book. I'm glad you mentioned it. So this book, is it titled How to Sell Better Than Amazon? That's the title of the book?
Yeah, so it's actually basically what we talked about in a nutshell. I don't promise that you can sell more than Amazon, but I can, promise that you can. The technology that Amazon uses to customize the buying experience isn't yet better than a human making decisions for humans.
Oh.
So if you can own a persona and start to look at it from the perspective of SaaS economics, which is I acquire a customer and I nurture the lifetime value of that customer over the course of their lifetime, and I use that to out leverage all of my competitors in growth, you can sell better than Amazon and by extension better than probably anybody else that you're competing with.
Got it. Love it. Yeah, everyone go check out the book at inboundcommerce.com. Sam, this has been a really fun discussion, and I've enjoyed talking to you. Any last words of advice, words of wisdom before we say goodbye to the listeners?
I'll tell you what, the two most important pieces of advice that I've probably ever gotten, both actually came from Dharmesh. One is always solve for the customer, and the other is focus. If you feel yourself getting distracted, imagine a tiny Dharmesh Shah standing on your shoulder telling you to focus.
I'm going to do that from now on. Sam, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us today, and we'll see everyone next time on Experts on the Wire.